In 2020, I predicted Joe Biden's exact 306 to 232 electoral college victory. And in this video, with just 5 days to go until the 2024 election, I'll be sharing with you guys my updated electoral map projection between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. This has probably been one of the most interesting election cycles in American history. I mean, just 5 months ago, Joe Biden was still expected to be the Democratic nominee, but in mid-July, he dropped out of the race. Kamala Harris secured her spot at the top of the ticket, and in August and September, this really looked like a competitive race. Many people on the left even thought that Harris was going to win, but I've been true to my projections this entire time. I've always put Trump ahead because this election is so different from what 2020 was like. The former president is so much more popular and is polling so much better all across the board. And so around 1 to 2 weeks ago, Trump began his final surge, reminiscent to what we saw in 2016. When everybody thought that Hillary Clinton was on track for a crushing victory, Donald Trump came out of nowhere, but there were early signs. He surged in the polling in the week before the election, and that is exactly what we're seeing right now. Donald Trump has actually taken the lead in the popular vote against Kamala Harris for the first time and leads in all 7 swing states, something that wasn't true ever since Kamala Harris entered the race. And so we're finally now going to dive right into the projection, starting off with the solid states for both candidates. Races that either Harris or Trump are going to win by 15 percentage points or more. This is certainly a high threshold to meet. Starting off with the safe blue states for Harris, we have Washington and California on the West Coast, as well as Hawaii, Illinois, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. As for Trump, he is easily going to carry Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except its 2nd district, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and South Carolina. So with these solid states filled in for both candidates, it is a virtual tie. Harris at 131, Trump at 122. Before we continue, I want to tell you guys about Proton VPN. With over 100 million users worldwide, Proton VPN allows you to change your IP address and connect to the internet from over 6,500 servers in over 110 countries across the globe. This way you can stream Netflix shows, national TV programs, or sports games that aren't available in your region. For example, let's say I wanted to connect to servers in Japan to watch my favorite anime shows. All I have to do is hover over Japan on the map and click connect. And now I am instantly connected to the Japanese internet. If I ask Google where I am, you can see that I pop up in Tokyo. On top of this, Proton VPN also provides a 400% Wi-Fi speed boost, integrated ad blocker, and a total privacy guarantee. Proton VPN is accessible to everyone. By using my link in the description below, you'll get 64% off. If you want to browse the internet privately while having the freedom to access sites from around the world, use my link in the description to start using Proton VPN. Coming back to the map, we're now going to fill in the likely states for both candidates, races that either nominee is going to win by 7 to 15 points. These states are going to be noticeably more competitive. They are going to be slightly contested, but one candidate will still maintain a clear edge. And so we're going to begin with the likely states for Donald Trump, starting off with the 2 most obvious. We have the state of Alaska, a state he's carried by double-digit margins in both of the last 2 elections. He is not going to lose Alaska, although the state has been trending to the left over the last few years. We also have the 2nd District of Maine. He is going to win that for a 3rd time as well. And then in the Midwest, of course, we have Iowa and Ohio. These 2 states were supposed to be very competitive in 2020. Polling said Trump was only going to win by 1%, but look what happened. He won Iowa by 8, Ohio by 8 as well. And this time, polling is showing Trump up by around 6 to 8 points in these 2 races. He's probably going to be able to break the double-digit threshold, but it's not going to be enough for these 2 races to be classified as solid. Trump is probably probably not going to win them by 15 points or more. But Iowa and Ohio, these are going to be reliable states for the former president. It's going to give him an additional 23 electoral votes. And then down in the Sun Belt, we have two additional likely Trump states. We're going to begin in Texas, another state where the polling had Trump up by just 1% in 2020. He carried it ultimately by 6. He won it by 9 back in 2016, and today he is on track for his largest margin ever. Polling in Texas shows him up by 10%. He might even get close to that 15-point threshold, something that no Republican has broken since Mitt Romney back in 2012. It is no secret that Texas has been trending to the left. It is definitely not as Republican as it once was, but this is a state that's not going to flip blue at least for another 2 to 3 decades. Just think about how many people there are on Texas. Democrats are going to have to flip millions upon millions of voters if they want to win the Lone Star State. That simply isn't happening anytime soon, and so Texas will remain likely red. And then finally, we have Florida. The Sunshine State used to be one of the closest in the country. Just look at 2012. It was the only tilt state on the map, the only state decided by 2 points or less. In 2016, it went to Trump by a tilt margin, by 1.2%, and then in 2020, everybody thought Joe Biden was going to win Florida, but not only did he lose it, he actually performed worse than Clinton from 4 years ago. And Trump's margin in Florida is probably going to triple once again, just like it did from 2016 to 2020. Trump is probably going to win the Sunshine State by around a double-digit margin, either right under it or right over it. And so with all the solid and likely states filled in, Donald Trump is at 219 electoral votes, just 51 away from the presidency. Kamala Harris has some catching up to do. We're now going to fill in her likely states. We're going to start off out west in Oregon, a state that was likely for Hillary Clinton back in 2016. The state simply isn't as liberal as its two neighbors. In fact, the governor's election in 2022 went down to a single-digit margin in Oregon, although the Democrat did end up coming out on top. We also have New York and New Jersey, two states that simply aren't as liberal as their northeastern neighbors anymore. Joe Biden won them by solid margins in 2020, but Kamala Harris isn't going to be able to repeat his success. New Jersey was barely solid blue, while New York went to Biden by 23 points. Kamala Harris is going to be lucky if she wins it by even half that margin, considering just how poorly Democrats are doing in New York. It's not the Democratic stronghold that it once was. So both of these states are going to be likely for the vice president. And finally, we have Colorado, a state that Kamala Harris is going to win by just over 7 points, despite Joe Biden having carried it by 14 4 years ago. Colorado is going to be a lot more competitive, but considering just how blue it was in 2020, it's unlikely that this state really gets that close. And so we're now left with the 12 most competitive races in the country, as well as the 2nd District of Maine. It is going to be these states that will actually decide who the 47th president is going to be. They make up less than a quarter of the Electoral College's 538 votes, but they really do have all the power when it comes to picking our next commander-in-chief. And so we're now going to fill in the lean states for both candidates. These are states that are going to go to Harris or Trump by margins of 2 to 7%. And so this time we'll start with the lean Harris states just to get them out of the way, because obviously we know that this election is going to come down to a group of 7, these 7 key battlegrounds. Now, the lean states for Harris, they're all states that Joe Biden carried by likely margins from 4 years ago. These states were not that close last time, but they are significantly more competitive now that Harris is at the top of the ticket. We're going to start off out west in New Mexico. Harris is going to win the race by just under 7 points. The state can definitely get competitive. Just look at what happened in 2016. Clinton won by just 8%, and I wouldn't be surprised if Harris performed even worse, as Hispanic voters in New Mexico are continuously shifting more and more to the right. We also have Tim Walz's home state of Minnesota. This is a big one. This is the home state of Harris's running mate, and she's not even going to be able to outperform Joe Biden. Joe Biden won Minnesota by 7 points, and he ran with Harris as his running mate, who was from nowhere near Minnesota. She, of course, calls California her home state. In 2016, Hillary Clinton almost lost the state entirely, so Trump can definitely get competitive here. Choosing Walz probably did save Kamala Harris from a humiliating defeat, but it's definitely not proven to be enough for her to actually outperform the incumbent president. Before he continue, only 70% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election on November 5th, where we can hopefully hit our goal of 300,000 subscribers. We're now left with just 3 more lean blue states and the 2nd District of Nebraska, which Harris is going to win by around 5 points after redistricting in 2021 made the 2nd District more liberal. It's basically Omaha and some of its surrounding suburbs. Moving up to the Northeast, we have New Hampshire and Maine, 2 states that were incredibly competitive back in 2016. Clinton carried the Granite State by just under half a percentage point, and Maine by less than 3. Now, Harris isn't going to perform as poorly as Clinton, but she's not going to outperform Biden, who carried New Hampshire by 7 and Maine by 9. So both of these races are going to fall somewhere in between. They're going to be lean blue. And finally, in Virginia, we have a race that's going to be just as competitive as it was in 2016 when Hillary Clinton came out on top by just 5 points. And this was when she ran with Tim Kaine, a literal sitting senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia. She wasn't even able to win the state by a likely margin. Joe Biden did, though, in 2020. He won it by 10.1%. Kamala Harris has no chance of winning Virginia by a likely margin. It's going to be significantly more competitive than it was 4 years ago. And so with all of the solid, likely, and lean Harris states filled in, she's at 226 electoral votes, neck and neck with Trump, who's at 219. But what you have to remember is that we haven't even started with the lean red states yet. And so with these 7 states, these are the 7 battlegrounds that you see in yellow on basically every single electoral map. The results in all the other states are basically predetermined. The reason why we have lean states for Trump in this category is because he's simply doing so well in races that are supposed to be purely even. And so we're basically going to chart out Trump's pathway to victory in terms of the states he's going to win by the largest margins, and then the ones that are going to be the most competitive out of these 7. So I'm going to start off in Arizona. This one's probably going to vote to the right of both Georgia and North Carolina, something that it did not do in either 2016 or 2020. In 2016, Trump won Arizona by 3.5%. He then lost it by 0.3 against Joe Biden. Arizona is an incredibly competitive state. It traditionally has been Republican, but over the last decade or so, it's shifted to the left. It currently has 2 sitting Democratic senators. Now, Republicans haven't made the best choices with their candidates in the down ballot races, whether it was governor in 2022 where Carrie Lake lost, or Carrie Lake again this time around for the Senate election against Ruben Gallego. We also saw Republicans put up Martha McSally twice. She was a disaster. Republicans can win races in Arizona. They just haven't been choosing the best candidates. But Trump is a strong candidate. He is going to be able to win Arizona. It is going to be lean Republican. I'm currently projecting around a 3% margin of victory for the former president. Out east, we also have Georgia and North Carolina. The early voting numbers in these 2 states are looking very good for Republicans. Trump is no doubt going to carry both of them. Now, he did win North Carolina in 2020, but he actually lost Georgia. It was the most competitive state in the entire country. Biden was the first Democrat to win it since Bill Clinton in 1992. And just like Arizona, Georgia traditionally has been a Republican stronghold. It went to Trump by 5 points in 2016. It went to Romney by 8 in 2012. And even John McCain carried it by 5 back in 2008. And under the Bush era, it was 16 points. So Georgia is going to return back into the Republican column. It's not going to be a huge victory for Trump, but it is going to be enough. This is the 2nd step to victory for the former president. He's also going to win at North Carolina, the only swing state he's won in both of the last 2 elections. And so Trump is now at 262 electoral votes. He can win any 3 of the remaining upper Midwestern states to cross 270. Nevada simply isn't going to be enough. And so we're going to start off in Pennsylvania. This is the one that's probably going to go to Trump first. Generally, it is the one in the middle of Michigan and Wisconsin in terms of how left or right leaning it is. However, because Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz to be her running mate, Minnesota governs Wisconsin quite a bit. She's going to receive a slight boost in the state, which is why Pennsylvania will likely be the tipping point that gets Trump over 270. It's a state he did win back in 2016. He also won Michigan and Wisconsin, so it's not at all impossible for him to win these 3 races. In 2020, he did lose Pennsylvania by 1.2, but he's leading in the polls by around 1%. There's no doubt he's going to outperform that. He is going to take Pennsylvania back. And so this really is it. The election is over. It doesn't really matter the electoral college margin that Trump actually wins by. However, he is going to win a few additional states. We have the tilt states. These races will be decided by 2 percentage points or less. And first off, we have Wisconsin and Michigan. Trump is not going to lose these races if he wins Pennsylvania. All 3 of these states, known as the former blue wall states, they always vote for the same candidate. In fact, the last time that they all didn't go to the same nominee was the election of 1988. In every single election from 1992 onwards, they all voted blue, with the exception of 2016 when Trump won all 3 of them, and then of course 2020, Joe Biden wins them back. I do not expect this trend to end. I expect all 3 of them to go to the same candidate, and that of course would be the former president. And finally, we also have Nevada, a state that's eluded Republicans for the last 20 years. Out of all the swing states, Nevada is the only one that Trump has never won before, but that is going to change in just 5 days. Nevada is going to go red. The state's been shifting to the right over the last decade. Republicans won the governorship here with Joe Lombardo, unseating the Democratic incumbent, Steve Sisolak. And so as we finally enter the month of November, Donald Trump, I currently project to win 312 electoral votes. Kamala Harris, 226. This is going to be the worst Democratic performance since 1988. Harris really is in trouble right now. Donald Trump has never been in a better position throughout the entire election cycle than he is in right now. Trump is peaking at the perfect moment. And so that'll be it for this video, but make sure you use my link in the description below to get 64% off Proton VPN so you can securely access content from all across the globe. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election on November 5th.